Stop trying so hard it's not making you more attractive. If you've ever poured your heart into a conversation, stayed up texting all night, planned thoughtful dates, and still ended up ignored, you're not alone. It's a frustrating truth most men face at some point. You try harder thinking that effort equals value. You assume that if you give more, she'll finally see your worth. But what if the very effort you're putting in is why she's losing interest? Here's the brutal reality: attraction isn't earned by effort, it's triggered by energy. Women don't fall for the man who tries the hardest. They fall for the man whose presence makes them feel something. The man who moves through the world with calm confidence. The man who doesn't chase because he doesn't need to. He knows who he is. When you overgive, over-explain, and overcompensate, you unknowingly send one loud message: you need her more than she needs you. That energy is heavy. It creates pressure, and pressure kills attraction. You see, we live in a culture that tells men to be nice, be available, make her feel special. But no one tells you this when that behavior comes from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. It backfires. She doesn't feel loved. She feels smothered. Think about the guys women chase. They're not jerks. They're not always better looking. They just move differently. They don't overtry. They're rooted, composed, and selective. And that energy? It's magnetic. The truth is, effort matters, but only when it's backed by self-respect, not desperation. When you give from a place of fullness, not emptiness. When your attention feels earned, not thrown at anyone who looks your way. So stop thinking you need to do more to be chosen. Start thinking about how you carry yourself. Your silence, your stillness, your boundaries. That's what speaks the loudest. Attraction begins when a woman feels your value, not when you try to prove it. And the moment you stop trying to convince her is the moment she starts wondering why you don't have to. That's not game playing. That's power. Silent, calm, unapologetically rare. In today's world, invisibility doesn't come from being weak, it comes from being forgettable. With dating apps, social media, and millions of faces flashing across screens every day, blending in is the easiest way to be overlooked. Most men don't realize it, but their desire to be liked, to fit in, to not rock the boat, is the very thing that makes them invisible. They play it safe. They act how they think women want them to act. And in doing so, they lose the one thing that could have made them unforgettable presence. Modern dating isn't just about having a good job, a decent body, or a witty line. It's about how you show up in the room, in the text, in the moment. Women don't remember average, they remember impact. And that impact doesn't come from trying to entertain or impress. It comes from energy that's grounded, distinct, and different from the noise. The man who stands out isn't necessarily the loudest or most confident. He's often the one who speaks less but says more. The one who doesn't rush to fill silence because he's not uncomfortable with it. The one who makes eye contact, holds posture, and owns his space like it belongs to him. While most men are performing, he's simply being, and that authenticity radiates. When a woman meets someone like that, she can't always explain what it is, but she feels it. She notices him without trying, not because he's doing the most, but because he's doing the opposite. His presence lingers. And in a world where everyone is screaming for attention, silence that holds power becomes deafening. Trying to fit in may keep you safe, but it will never make you stand out. And in the game of attraction, standing out is everything. She doesn't fantasize about the guy who plays it safe. She dreams about the man who moves differently, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who isn't concerned with approval, because he already knows who he is. So don't waste your energy trying to be like the rest. Be the man who makes her pause, the man who makes her look twice, the one she can't quite explain but can't seem to forget either. That's the man who wins. There's a kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice to be respected. He doesn't need to argue, overreact, or prove himself because his calm speaks louder than chaos ever could. This is the unshakable man. And in a world where most men are constantly reacting, constantly chasing approval, he becomes magnetic by doing the opposite. He stays still. Women are drawn to mystery, but not the kind that comes from playing games or being emotionally distant. True mystery is born from composure, from knowing who you are so deeply that nothing and no one can easily throw you off center. That's what makes a woman lean in. That's what makes her curious. Because most men fold when things get quiet or awkward or emotionally intense. But not him. When silence enters the room, he doesn't flinch. He owns it. Imagine being on a date. The conversation slows. She looks at you, expecting you to fill the silence like every other guy would, with nervous laughter, small talk, or an attempt to impress. But instead, you just sit there, calm, grounded. You meet her gaze without trying to make it easier. You're not cold. You're just centered. And that stillness, it pulls her in. Because in that moment she feels something rare: safety, without softness, power, without pressure. This man doesn't talk much, but when he does, it matters. Every word feels intentional. Every pause feels deliberate. He doesn't dominate the room, but somehow he owns it. Because presence, not volume, is what makes someone unforgettable. In a culture that teaches men to be louder, funnier, or more impressive to win attention, the unshakable man rewrites the rules. His energy says, "I don't chase what doesn't align with me." And that confidence, that unspoken boundary, is felt more deeply than any clever line or performance ever could. He doesn't need to prove he's in control. He just is. And that quiet authority creates a gravitational pull. In a sea of noise, he is the calm. And in that calm, she finds the one thing she didn't know she was craving: a man who doesn't lose himself trying to win her. There's something irresistible about a man with vision. Not a dreamer who just talks, but a builder who moves one quiet step at a time towards something bigger than himself. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, flashy status, and meaningless attention, a man who is dedicated to building something real stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. He's not posting daily for validation. He's not trying to impress with words. His life speaks for him, and it says, "I'm going somewhere." Women don't just want to be entertained. They want to feel inspired. They want to see that you have a mission, a purpose outside of them, and that they're not your finish line, but a potential partner in a journey that's already in motion. And the builder provides exactly that. He's not busy to avoid intimacy. He's focused because he knows what matters. He doesn't need to be chased, but he's not cold either. His warmth is in his momentum, in the fact that he's already going somewhere meaningful. Imagine this. She texts, "What are you up to tonight?" And instead of saying nothing much or trying to sound available, you respond, "Working on the next phase of my project, trying to stay locked in. Maybe we can catch up this weekend. I'd love your take on something." In that moment, you didn't just show her that you're busy. You showed her that you're grounded. You gave her space to step into your world without making her the center of it. That subtle difference, it changes everything. Because now she doesn't feel like you're performing for her attention. She feels chosen, not chased. And that feeling, it's rare. It's valuable. It's unforgettable. The builder doesn't just attract with what he's doing. He attracts with who he's becoming. And when a man is actively creating a life with purpose, his energy becomes contagious. He doesn't beg for connection. He becomes someone worth connecting to. Not just because of where he is now, but because of where he's going. And that kind of man isn't just attractive. He's magnetic, because she doesn't want to lead you. She wants to walk beside you if you've built something worth joining. There's a quiet strength in a man who knows how to say no and means it, not out of anger, not to punish, but because his time, energy, and presence are valuable, and he treats them that way. In a world where so many men bend over backwards to please, to avoid conflict, or to prove their worth, the man with boundaries becomes rare, and in that rarity, he becomes deeply attractive. This isn't about being controlling. It's not about playing cold or indifferent. It's about self-respect. A man with boundaries doesn't seek approval through over-explaining or constant availability. He doesn't chase attention. He attracts it by moving with clarity. When someone crosses a line, he doesn't explode, he simply steps back. When a woman pulls away, plays games, or cancels plans last minute, he doesn't beg or negotiate. He stays calm, and he pulls his energy too. Not to manipulate, but because his presence isn't something to be taken lightly. Picture this. She bails on a date last minute with a vague excuse. Most men would panic, get passive-aggressive, or try to salvage the moment to avoid losing her, but not him. He sends a short, grounded response. All good. Let me know when you're sure. That's it. No drama, no chase. Just standard. Just self-respect. And that calm restraint. It's unforgettable. Because in that moment she realizes she's not dealing with a boy desperate for attention. She's dealing with a man who knows his worth. Women test boundaries not always maliciously, but often subconsciously. And when a man holds his ground, he creates something powerful: trust. She may not always agree with his choices, but she'll respect him for having them. Because deep down, every woman knows this. A man who doesn't respect himself will never be able to truly protect, lead, or love her in a meaningful way. The man with boundaries doesn't seek validation from others. He's already given it to himself. And in a culture where everyone's trying to be liked, he becomes unforgettable by being rooted, by moving through life with quiet standards. And when a woman feels that not forced, not faked, but real, she won't want to test him. She'll want to stand next to him. There's something magnetic about a man who doesn't need to say much to command attention. He's not the loudest in the room. He doesn't flood conversations with compliments or jokes. He's not constantly seeking to be noticed, and that's exactly why he is. This is the man with focus. The man who isn't easily distracted, who listens more than he speaks, and who makes people, especially women, feel seen. Not flattered, not overwhelmed, but truly noticed. In a world obsessed with noise, this man becomes rare. While other men try to win her over with excessive praise, endless texting, or trying to be fun, he plays a different game entirely. One of presence over performance. He's fully in the moment. When he looks at her, it's not to impress, it's to observe, to feel, to respond with intention. And that focus, it doesn't just catch her attention, it lingers in her memory. Machiavelli once said, "A wise man does at once what a fool does at last." This man lives that truth. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't stumble through overthinking. He acts with precision. Even when flirting, he's calm and exact. Imagine a woman posting a photo while dozens of men flood her with fire emojis or generic compliments. He zooms in on something real, a book in the background, a subtle detail, a message that shows he actually sees her, not just her body, but her presence. That kind of focus isn't just rare, it's unforgettable. It cuts through the noise because it's not trying to be noise at all. It's clarity. It's awareness, and most of all, it's restraint, the kind of emotional control that says, I know what I'm doing, and I don't need your validation to keep doing it. The man with focus makes her feel something that most men never can: depth. Not because he's trying to be deep, but because he is. His silence has weight. His attention feels earned. And in a culture that's constantly trying to get her attention, he becomes the one she can't stop thinking about. Because he's the only one who made her feel truly seen. Not by shouting louder, but by being still long enough to notice what others missed. In a world where everyone is online all the time, constantly posting, constantly reaching, constantly reacting, a man who holds back becomes unforgettable. He's not trying to be mysterious. He simply knows his energy has value, and he guards it like something sacred. This is the man with rare energy, and that scarcity makes him magnetic. You don't hear from him every morning. He doesn't flood your notifications or show up in every story. But when he does appear, he shifts the room. He leaves an imprint not by being loud, but by being deliberate. This man understands something most never will. When your presence is constant, it loses meaning. But when it's selective, when it's earned, it becomes desirable. He's not withholding to play games. He's just intentional. He gives from a place of fullness, not fear. And that difference is everything. Because in a sea of men competing to be seen, he becomes the one she wonders about, because she can't quite access him like the others. Imagine this: she hasn't heard from you in a while. She's used to guys texting every day, sending memes, chasing attention. But then one day, out of nowhere, you send a message. Simple. Thoughtful. Maybe a meme tied to a joke you shared, or a calm check-in that connects to something real. You're not chasing. You're reminding her gently, powerfully, that you're still here and still rare. That subtle absence you maintained, it made space for her curiosity to grow. Because attraction doesn't always bloom in presence. Sometimes it explodes in silence. And your silence isn't cold, it's calculated. It tells her, I am not for everyone. My attention is earned. That's the kind of energy that lingers in her mind long after the message ends. A man with rare energy doesn't flood the room. He focuses on presence over performance. His value isn't declared, it's felt. And when a woman senses that his attention isn't given to everyone, it makes her want it even more. Not because he's unavailable, but because he's selective. And in that selectivity, she sees something she rarely encounters: a man who isn't trying to be chosen. He's simply too valuable to waste on the ordinary. In a world where everyone is trying to be louder, faster, and constantly available, one of the most powerful moves a man can make is to slow down, stand still, and become intentional. The lessons from this content are clear. Attraction, respect, and influence aren't about doing more. They're about doing less, but with meaning. The most important shift is in energy. Stop performing. Stop trying to impress or win approval. Women and people in general respond to certainty, focus, and self-respect far more than they respond to effort or noise. Whether you're dating, leading, or simply navigating daily life, the way you carry yourself sends a louder message than your words ever will. Set boundaries without guilt. Protect your energy. Be selective with your time, your attention, and your presence. Show up when it matters, not just to be seen. When you're calm, composed, and rooted in who you are, you become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because that kind of energy is rare in today's world. You don't need to be all things to all people. Find the strength in your quiet. Build something real. Stay grounded in your values and let your presence speak for itself. The less you chase, the more others feel your weight. That's not arrogance, that's clarity. That's power. Apply this to your life by stepping back from over-explaining, over-giving, and overthinking. Be the one who moves with purpose, the one who listens more than he speaks, the one who chooses rather than tries to be chosen. In the end, it's not about being perfect. It's about being undeniably real in a world full of noise.